The last few years, I kind of am feeling a little burnout of New Year's resolutions and maybe just this goal setting. And I'm going to tell you why, because I figured it out and figured out something that I think is going to work better for me. So I'm going to just back up a little bit. Story about me, I've always had, at least through college, high school, I would say, early marriage, pretty strong self-control was something I was proud of. Always worked out pretty much every single day. Throughout college, would run 5 to 6 miles almost every day. And when I set my mind to something, I would do it. I decided in college I would never study on Sundays. I would hit it hard the rest of the week. I would study my scriptures. And I was pretty much consistent all the time. Got married, things were good, went to law school in New York City, would read on the train, still would get my miles in the morning before I left. And then I had a baby, and then quickly had 2 more babies. So I had 3 under 16 months. And started getting involved, started the Small Seed, started doing some other projects. I feel like every project I did, I had another baby and I had another project, and it just kind of kept building. And I think that's kind of life. Like, I'm not alone in this, right? Like, the more we do, the more we have to do if we want to. So I started noticing, especially the last 2 years, I had a baby, and then I couldn't really exercise for the first part, and then I'd start working out, and then there would be a project piling up. In this last year, I said, you know what, for a month or so, I just can't work out. Things are crazy. My scripture study time started getting less and less. But I thought, with that came, it was harder to do, which was kind of funny to me. Like, not only was I just maybe less in shape, but it was harder to want to work out. It was hard to do it. And I started understanding comments people would make to me who hated working out before, that would say, man, working out's just so easy to you. And looking back in hindsight, it used to be easier for me. It really did. And so this year, Christmas passes, New Year's approaching, and I thought, I want to set goals. I want to set New Year's resolutions, but I really don't want to look back and just set them and then a few weeks later break them and feel worse off than before. Like, that kills me. It makes me feel even worse, right? You may be raising your hand like you've been there, or hello. But this is the story I was living, and I hated it, because in my past, again, like, I was a woman of self-control, always. I've said something, I put my mind to it. So lucky for me, and totally not anything I had to control of, my husband for Christmas gave me an Audible subscription, which was total awesome for me, because the first book I chose, I just got on, and the first one that popped up is a book that I'm going to be talking about today that's totally changed my mindset. And I know we're only 12 days into New Year's, but I can already tell that it's changing how I'm thinking about changing me. The book is called The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg. New York Times bestseller. It's one of the best rated books on Audible. And I'll just say this because a lot of the principles I'm going to be talking about today come from that book. Just go read it. Just go listen to it. This guy nails so many correct principles, and you can apply them. So I start reading this, not thinking it's going to apply to my New Year's resolutions at all, but it's completely changed how I set up. So I'm going to teach you a little bit about what he talks about in the book. We're going to talk about habits, what creates habits, how you change habits. Change, not end, is the key. We're going to talk a little bit about willpower. I'm going to talk about one of my biggest heroes who had a habit that I look up to in a major way. And then I'm going to let you guys know my word of the year, which is not habit. I put that, I think, in one of my Instagram posts. It's not habit, but it's very related to that. And then we're going to end with a challenge. And we're going to do this in about 15 minutes. I don't like long chats, especially because I can't hear what you're saying back. So, habits. What is a habit? I'm going to talk about, and I'm just going to throw this up. I think this is backwards. Yeah, it's backwards. Okay, I'll just read off of it. A habit has 3 parts to it. It has a cue, something that triggers the habit, a routine, which is generally what you think about when you think about the habit, the activity that you do, and then third, it has a reward, something that you get because of your habit. If there weren't a reward, you wouldn't have done that behavior and then continue to do it repeatedly. Habits are neither good or bad inherently. They're just habits, right? It's some ingrained behavior that there's a cue that sets you off, a behavior that you do, and then a reward that you get out of it. In the research, this was actually fascinating to me. You can't, once you have a habit, that habit loop doesn't stop in your brain. I've never heard this before. I have a little bit like spiritually, a little bit of I don't know if I totally agree with that, because I think we can all overcome at some point. Like, I believe in Jesus. I believe things can be cut out of our life, but it's probably going to take a long time anyway. So I think this is still really good. So you've got your cue, your routine, and your reward. Research says that if you have a habit, it's never going to leave you. How you change a habit is by replacing it, by putting in some other cue, reward, routine that starts becoming more ingrained than the one that you did previously. So in my life, as I look back at the things that I was super good at, this actually makes sense, because I've replaced those great habits in some cases with not so great habits. But it also gives me excitement. It gives me hope, because somewhere in there, those good habits are still there. Those things that I used to do that I want to get back to are still there. But it also teaches me how to replace a habit that's not so good, right? So we are going to talk about how to change a habit. First of all, if you want to change a habit, and this is, you think about a resolution. I think oftentimes when I'm looking now at the resolutions I used to set, it was lose 10 more pounds or whatever it was. It was some big thing, right? And rarely did I say, here are the habits that are actually contributing to that. Just eat healthy. But I never sat down and said, well, when are the times I'm kind of not eating healthy? What's driving that, and what's the reward? Why has that become a habit in my life? So the first thing you're going to do, again from the book, The Power of Habit by Charles Duhigg, is you're going to diagnose every element of this loop. The routine. And where you actually start, you just write down the routine. That's the easiest thing to know, right? I overeat at typically the afternoons and late at nights. That's the time when I either overeat or I pick foods that make me feel crappy. Processed foods, too much sugar, whatever. So that's my routine. That's the behavior I want to change. Then you next diagnose and you figure out, what is the reward that I'm seeking? And what he says in his book, and I'm actually going to post, he has a guide to changing habits that's really good, where he talks about how to go through this. So what am I actually craving? Try a few other rewards and see. This is what he says. Try something, then jot down 3 words of how you felt. So instead of, say my habit was at 3 p.m. I go get a cookie. This is the one he uses. I'm going to go try a few different rewards. Maybe really I just want to break from my work. So maybe I'm going to call up my sister. And so I'm going to try a couple other things to see, are those actually the rewards I'm seeking right now? Because he says he went to get a cookie at 3 p.m., but he'd always go up to the cafeteria and he'd socialize. So maybe that was really the reward, right? So you go and you try a different reward, and then you jot down 3 words of how you felt after you did this new reward. So try to call someone, try to go drink a cup of something warm, or get a glass of water, or go for a walk, or try different things, and then just write down 3 words. They could be totally random. He puts in here, I saw flowers, I feel happy, I am tired. Whatever it is. For every one of those rewards, start doing it. Then set a 15-minute alarm, and then ask yourself, do I still want, in his example, that cookie? For you, whatever it was, that was my old routine. Do I still want to go do X? If so, that probably wasn't a reward that replaced it. If you don't want it anymore, then you've probably found a good reward. After this, you can then go and find, so now what was the cue? And he gives 5 keys that you write down. Is it a location cue? Is it a time cue? Is it an emotional state cue? Is it a people cue? Is it someone that you were with or people that you're around? Or was it the action you did just preceding? So start writing this down. And this one, the example, it always almost happened at between 2 and 3 p.m., right? So he kind of knew this is mostly a time cue. It's a certain time of day. I'm always feeling a certain way. Maybe it's a location. What I thought was really funny is I was going through this loop in my mind and thinking about the things that I want to change, my habit loops I want to replace. I realized when I was on vacation, I have vacation habits. And I normally vacation, I go see family because they all live far away, so we take a lot of our vacation to see them on the West Coast. And so we're typically in a really similar location. So there's foods that are there that are on the East Coast. There's people, there's certain habits that we have as a family that we start falling back into because of people, right? So I just thought it was really interesting as I started looking back at what were the cues that were triggering behaviors, some that I loved, some that I didn't. And then once you know your cue, you know your routine, you know your reward, you can change the habit. The routine is really what you're wanting to change, right? You still have that cue in there, and you've now figured out the kind of reward you're seeking. Now change the habit, change the routine of what you were doing before. So this applies to so many things in the book. He goes through how it works in organizations. He goes through a ton of different things that I love. But this took my New Year's resolutions from whatever, lose 10 pounds or whatever my goal was, and it made it specific, right? I have habits that are doing this. So this is how you're going to do it. It's in his thing. I'm going to put this up. I want to talk now for a second about willpower, because this is kind of the two-step dance that I thought was really fascinating. Willpower is a muscle. I hadn't really heard of that before, but it made sense. And as you exercise your willpower, it tires you out. So if you're making decisions all day that are hard, you don't have any great habits or routines, by the end of the night, you're probably pretty tired, and then you go do the behavior you didn't want to do. So that's one thing. But also, as you do proactive things or great habits and you practice those again and again, they call them, there's keystone habits that make you better at everything else. So some of the keystone habits they listed were exercise. Just exercising in general makes good willpower, so that guess what happens? You make other better decisions throughout the day. So this is a great win, right? If you know I can attack one kind of a habit first and I go for that habit, it's not only going to help me there, it's going to help me with other habits in my life. So in the book and in the research, they call these small wins. If you can get a small win somewhere, it kind of sets the snowball rolling. It gives you a little bit of momentum, not just because you're like feeling high on life, but you've actually exercised a willpower muscle. So just go pick one of these, especially if they're a keystone habit like exercise, or I believe prayer and scripture study. Some of those good keystone habits will then help your other habits and make those decisions a little bit easier for you. So I want to talk for just a second. I listened into a funeral today of a man that frankly I've met him once in life, but impacted my life probably as much as anyone. He's a leader, was the leader in our church, President Thomas S. Monson, and he passed away about 10 days ago, and he had his funeral today. I didn't get to listen to the whole thing, but I caught the first and the end while I was picking up kids. And what was really interesting, I started thinking back on his life and why he's impacted me. One of the number one reasons, besides my belief that he's a prophet and he speaks for God, is he had a habit of doing good. And almost everybody that speaks about him, that's the first thing I hear them say. He would show up in the most random of places. And people would say, I knew Tommy Monson was going to come, or I knew Tom Monson was going to come. He'd show up at a hospital just before someone died, or he'd show up when somebody asked for a blessing and for him to come. And he just did it. He did it and did it. And as I thought about his life, I thought, that's a habit that he had. He had a cue, which for him was actually a spiritual prompting, a spiritual impression. He had the action that he took, the routine, every time he followed those promptings, and then the reward, which is probably a feeling of satisfaction, maybe seeing when the person then said, I knew you'd come. It was reinforcing that routine for him. But what I loved the most was a scripture that was read at the very end of his funeral today. And it's about a prophet in America named Nephi. And this is what was said about him. And today in the funeral, it was also said about Thomas S. Monson. It says, and this is God speaking in the scripture. He says, Blessed art thou for the things which thou hast done. For I have beheld how thou hast with unweariness declared the word. Thou hast not feared people. Thou hast not sought thine own life. Thou hast sought my will and to keep my commandments. And I thought I've never thought of commandments that way. I've never thought of listening to promptings or that voice inside of you in that way. But that's also a habit that we can get better at, that we can improve upon, and that we can correct over and over as we feel a cue, as we act on that. It becomes a little easier every time because we feel those rewards. And I had to laugh. I still got nervous today to get on this silly live chat. I don't know why. But it was easier than last time. And I thought, this is exactly an example of this, right? And an example to you, am I back on? That as you just step out and do something. I've had a lot of emails in the past couple weeks of people that have said, I felt this call to do X and I didn't act on it. A lot of people saying, I didn't act on it. I was scared. Somebody told me I shouldn't, or it was silly, or I got feedback or whatever. I just want to promise you that as you act to do something, it'll get easier every single time. And you're building a muscle that slowly you're going to stop caring what everybody's saying, and you're going to start doing it. And it'll start to become instinctual, and it'll start to be a habit, and you're not going to have to think about it because you've committed to do. You've got yourself a cue and you're doing it. And this, I wanted to follow up. The second verse says a promise of what happened to this man when God was speaking to him, because he's been unwearying in following that cue. Because thou hast done this with such unweariness, behold, I will bless thee forever. I'll make thee mighty in word and in deed, in faith and in works. Yea, even that all things shall be done unto thee according to thy word. He's given power. He's become mighty in faith and in works. And I think that's a promise. I mean, it may be weird to take this and say, let's apply this to all habits, but it is. You become unweary in the things you feel, and you do them, and you're mighty, you're blessed, your family's blessed, you're given faith and great works. So with that, my word for 2018 that I've decided on, last year, one of my sweetest friends, Melanie Burke, put it on a necklace. It's not this one. Mine's still packed because I still have to unpack from vacation. It was a line. I wanted to more closely align my actions with my beliefs last year. This year, my word is become. I want to become those things that I've been struggling with the last few years. And the way I'm going to do that is by deciding, and this is my challenge to you, should you choose to accept it this month. I'm going to put it, and don't email me, don't direct message me, or if you do, that's great. But I want you to write it in the comments of the Instagram, because I want us to encourage each other. If you're going to do this, if you're on board, let other people see it. It's exciting for me to see it, but let other people who want to jump on board, because in the other part of the book, he talks about what we need is belief. And belief is best strengthened by other people, which I've never thought about. He talks about AA, the 12-step program, how when we have other people around there and we're telling them what we're going to do and we're seeing action and we're sharing action, belief comes as we unite with other believers. I'll put in quotations because it's not even necessarily something spiritual, but with other people who are acting as well. So here's my challenge. I want you to take a piece of paper, if you choose to accept it, and I want you to write, I know again it's backwards, but habits to replace and habits to start. And draw a line down. I just started this, and write all the habits you want to replace. You're not going to tackle all these at once, but write them all on one column. What are the habits you want to replace that right now you're doing that you don't love, that aren't helping you become who you want to become? Sorry, I don't know why I've got a poor connection right now. On the other side, habits to start. What are some great habits you want to start? And write as many as you want, because guess what? You have the whole year. And this month in January, I'm just going to focus on two. A habit I want to replace and a habit I want to start. And then the habits you want to replace, go back, rewatch this about how to replace a habit. If you want to start a good habit, pick a cue, pick your behavior, that's already the habit, right? And then pick a reward of something that you're excited about. It may just be the endorphins from a run. It may be, if it's family dinner, just the good feeling. Maybe the reward's already built in. If it's not, one I've thought about that I may be doing is I want to get back into my everyday workouts. I really like smoothies, call me crazy. And so that's going to be a reward that I give myself, is I'm going to make a smoothie to kind of celebrate that workout, because it feels good, it tastes good, and it's good for me. So habits to replace, habits to start. I'm going to put this down in my Instagram. You can write out, if you want, the habits you're going to replace, that one habit you're going to replace, the one habit you're going to start. If you don't want to share it with everybody, just put I'm in. I've picked my two, and then I'm going to follow up. We're going to have a little core group here that goes throughout the month, and we're going to check in on each other with our habits. I'll be checking in on you guys. Feel free to check in on me, but I'll be reporting back. But that's my challenge for this week. You choose to accept it, follow up on my Instagram and share. And I'm going to end. We started out with a little song. I'm going to end with another song, because this is another one I've got on repeat. Let's see if I can jump to the fun part. This is again from The Greatest Showman, because the music I'm kind of obsessed with. and this is the end. He has a habit that he's gotten into that's not great, and he's decided he's going to change it. And this is like, he calls it his anthem from now on. So I'm just going to play a couple lines of this. I can get to a good part.
From now on, these eyes will not be blinded by the light. From now on, what's waited till tomorrow starts?
What's waiting till tomorrow starts tonight. Or not.
Let this promise in me start like an anthem in my heart. From now on, from now on.
Okay, if you're in, respond below and on the next Instagram post I do, and let's kill this month. Let's do well with our new habits, new resolutions, new year, and become who we want to be. Thanks for joining. I'll put this up on my YouTube, and see you next week on our next live chat.